He gasped. You sent the files to the dean? I looked at him, actually. I just reclaimed my. In the cutthroat world of elite American academia, there is a saying, publish or perish. It is not just a catchy motto, it is a blood oath. You are only as valuable as your last peer-reviewed paper, your last massive grant, your last groundbreaking discovery. For the past 15 years, my husband, Arthur, was the golden boy of the cognitive neuroscience department at one of the most prestigious R1 research universities in New England. He was charismatic, brilliantly articulate, and perpetually clad in tailored tweed. He was the public face of success. But behind every great man, there is usually a woman meticulously fixing his mistakes. I was that woman. My name is Dr. Eleanor Vance. I hold a PhD in molecular biology from Hopkins. 12 years ago, when our son, Lucas, was diagnosed with a severe autoimmune disorder, we had a choice to make. We could not both maintain the grueling, 80-hour work weeks required for the tenure track. I loved my son and I loved my research, so I made the sacrifice. I stepped away from the university faculty, built a state-of-the-art computational lab in our home office, and became an independent researcher and consultant. For over a decade, I ghostwrote Arthur's grant proposals. I cleaned his raw data. I made him a star while I operated in the shadows. I thought we were a team. I thought my sacrifice was respected. I was catastrophically wrong. The first sign of the betrayal was painfully cliché. It started in the early fall. Arthur began working late, citing his role as the primary advisor for a new cohort of doctoral candidates. He changed the passcode on his phone. His dry cleaning faintly smelled of cheap vanilla body mist rather than his usual cedarwood cologne. When I asked him about his late nights, he would sigh, rubbing his temples, and gaslight me with the practiced ease of a master manipulator. Eleanor, you've been out of the faculty loop for so long, you just don't understand the pressure I'm under. The department is breathing down my neck. Please don't add your paranoia to my plate. He made me feel small. He made me feel like an irrelevant, nagging housewife. But I am a scientist. I do not rely on emotions. I rely on evidence. Our home internet network was a highly encrypted, enterprise-grade system that I had personally installed and maintained to protect my independent clinical data. Arthur was a brilliant theorist, but he was a technological dinosaur. He never realized that the router logged every single piece of traffic that passed through our IP address. One Friday night, while he was mentoring at a downtown hotel, I poured myself a glass of Cabernet, sat at my monitors, and ran a simple diagnostic on his university cloud drive. I expected to find hotel receipts. I expected to find illicit emails or photos. I found those, of course. Her name was Chloe Adams. She was 25 years old, a third-year PhD candidate in his department, and her emails to my husband were a nauseating mix of romantic obsession and ruthless career ambition. But the affair was not the discovery that stopped my heart. It was a folder on his desktop labeled Vance_Adams_Nature_Draft. Docs. My hands trembled as I opened the document. It was a nearly finalized manuscript prepared for Nature, the most prestigious scientific journal in the world. I began reading the abstract, and a cold, suffocating terror washed over me. It was my work. For 3 years, I had been working tirelessly from home on a massive, longitudinal study mapping the neuroplasticity of early-onset Alzheimer's models. It was my magnum opus. I had confided in Arthur about my breakthroughs, sharing my data sets with him over dinner, trusting him as my sounding board. I was preparing to submit it for a solo publication that would have secured me an executive director position at any private research institute in the country. Arthur had stolen it. He had copied my entire hard drive. He had taken 3 years of my sleep-deprived nights, my complex statistical modeling, and my absolute genius, and he had repackaged it. I scrolled to the title page. First author, Chloe Adams. Second author, Dr. Arthur Vance. My name was not even in the acknowledgments. He was gifting my life's work to his mistress. Chloe was an intellectually mediocre student struggling to secure a postdoctoral fellowship. Arthur was using my intellect to buy his 25-year-old girlfriend a glittering career at Stanford or MIT. He was trading my future for her body. The betrayal was so profound, so utterly violating, that it bypassed grief and transformed instantly into a calculated, glacial rage. If I confronted him then, he would have deleted the files, claimed I was having a mental breakdown, and used his institutional power to bury me. I would not let that happen. My father once told me that if you are going to strike a king, you must ensure he never rises again. I spent the next 6 weeks playing the perfect, oblivious wife. I cooked his dinners. I asked about his day. When he patronizingly told me that my independent research was probably a bit outdated by now and suggested I abandon the Alzheimer's project too. Focus on baking and volunteering at Lucas's school, I smiled and agreed with him. You're right, Arthur, I told him one evening, placing a plate of roast chicken in front of him. I've been feeling a bit burnt out. Maybe I'll just archive the data and take a break. The relief in his eyes was palpable. He thought he had won. He thought the coast was clear. While Arthur and Chloe spent their afternoons in hotel rooms, I went to war. In academia, raw data is the ultimate currency. To prove ownership, you must possess the original, unedited sequence. I logged into the master database on the university cloud that Arthur had so carelessly synced to his laptop. I didn't delete the data. I did something much worse. I introduced a trap street. It is a trick used by cartographers where they put a fake, invisible street on a map to catch copyright infringers. I dove deep into the millions of lines of genetic and neurological data in the appendix of his stolen manuscript. I altered a microscopic sequence of baseline variables in the control group. I created a statistically impossible anomaly that only the original architect of the study, me, could possibly identify or explain. Furthermore, I embedded a cryptographic hash into the document's metadata. It was a digital watermark containing my name, my personal IP address, and a timestamp registered with the United States Copyright Office dating back 2 years. To the naked eye, the data looked perfect. To a forensic data analyst, it was a ticking time bomb with my signature carved into the detonator. The deadline for the Nature submission was November 15th at 8 a.m. On the night of November 14th, the tension in our house was suffocating. Arthur was pacing the living room, frantically reviewing the final PDF on his MacBook. Chloe was texting him incessantly. I could see the notifications lighting up his phone on the kitchen island. He was going to hit submit the moment he woke up. At 11:30 p.m., Arthur rubbed his exhausted eyes, closed his laptop, and went up to bed. Big day tomorrow, Elle, he mumbled, kissing my cheek. Major department milestones. I know, I whispered. Sleep well. I waited until I heard his deep, rhythmic snoring. Then I walked into my home office and locked the door. The house was dead silent, save for the hum of my servers. I sat at my dual monitors, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I didn't just change the passwords. That would be too easy to fix. I accessed his MacBook through our network's administrative backdoor. With 3 keystrokes, I executed a military-grade remote wipe of his local hard drive. Every draft, every email, every file synchronized to his desktop was shredded into unrecoverable binary dust. His screen blinked black in the dark living room. Next, I logged into the university's administrative cloud, using the credentials he had foolishly saved on his browser. I revoked his access to his own research folders, locking the directory behind a 256-bit encryption key that only I possessed. But I was not done. I opened my encrypted email server. I had drafted a comprehensive dossier. It contained the original, watermarked datasets, the time-stamped copyright certificates, and 74 pages of romantic and sexually explicit emails between Professor Arthur Vance and his subordinate, Chloe Adams, detailing their plan to falsify authorship. I attached the dossier to an email. I set the recipients, the Dean of the College of Sciences, the University Ethics and Academic Integrity Board, the Title IX Coordinator, the Provost, and the Editor-in-Chief of Nature. The subject line read, Formal complaint of intellectual property theft, academic fraud, and Title IX violations regarding Dr. Arthur Vance. At 2 a.m., I clicked send. I watched the progress bar fill, delivering the payload that would completely obliterate his life. I poured the last glass of Cabernet, drank it in the dark, and went to sleep in the guest room. Monday morning broke with a violent, beautiful chaos. At 6:45 a.m., I heard a frantic, primal shout from the living room. Arthur was slamming his fists onto his laptop keyboard. Eleanor. Eleanor. The Wi-Fi is down. My hard drive is completely corrupted. Where is my paper? I walked out of the guest room, wearing my silk robe, holding a steaming mug of coffee. I stood at the top of the stairs and looked down at him. He was hyperventilating, his hair disheveled, sweat pooling on his forehead. The Wi-Fi is fine, Arthur, I said, my voice perfectly level. He stared at me, his eyes wild with panic. My files are gone. The cloud is locked out. I have to submit this in an hour, Eleanor. I need you to run a recovery. His cell phone began to ring. It wasn't Chloe. It was the dean of faculty. Arthur's hands shook as he answered it. Dean Roberts, good morning. I'm having some technical. He stopped. The blood drained from his face so fast I thought he might faint. His mouth opened and closed like a dying fish. There must be a mistake. A misunderstanding. Plagiarism? No, that is my work. My student and I. He listened for another 10 seconds. His knees literally buckled, and he sank onto the living room sofa. The phone slipped from his hand and fell onto the rug. He slowly looked up at me. The realization hit him like a freight train. Trouble with the submission, Arthur? I asked softly, taking a sip of my coffee. What did you do? He whispered, his voice trembling with sheer terror. Eleanor, what did you do? I fixed your data, I replied, walking slowly down the stairs. You missed a variable in the control group. A very specific sequence that I patented 2 years ago. I thought the ethics board and the editor of Nature would appreciate the correction. He leaped up, grabbing my arms. You sent it to the dean. You sent it to the journal. Eleanor, you've destroyed me. They're convening an emergency disciplinary hearing at 9 o'clock. They know about Chloe. You have to call them back. Tell them you were angry. Tell them you made a mistake. I don't make mistakes, Arthur, I said. Stepping out of his grasp, my eyes locking onto his with absolute zero warmth. You tried to steal 3 years of my life to buy a career for a 25-year-old girl who can't even run a basic regression analysis. You thought because I stayed home I was weak. You forgot who wrote every successful grant you've had for the last decade. You forgot who the real scientist in this house is. Please, he begged, tears streaming down his face. I'll give you first authorship. I'll fire Chloe. I'll do whatever you want. 6 years of my tenure, my pension, it's all gone, Eleanor. I'll have nothing. You have exactly what you earned, I said. My attorney will serve you with the divorce papers by noon. I expect you to be out of my house before I return from dropping Lucas at school. The fallout was catastrophic and deeply satisfying. Universities will tolerate many things, but they will not tolerate massive academic fraud that threatens their federal funding. Arthur was immediately suspended without pay pending a full investigation. By Wednesday, Chloe Adams had turned entirely against him. To save her own skin, she testified to the Title IX committee that Arthur had coerced her into the affair using his power as her advisor, and that the plagiarism was entirely his idea. It didn't save her. She was expelled for academic dishonesty, her career in science permanently eradicated. Arthur was stripped of his tenure. No university in the country would hire a professor disgraced by a Nature plagiarism scandal. The man who once commanded lecture halls was reduced to seeking administrative jobs in corporate HR, buried under a mountain of legal debt from our divorce. As for the research, once the dust settled, I submitted the raw, untainted manuscript under my own name. It was published 6 months later to widespread acclaim. Based on that publication, I was offered a massive independent grant and a position as a senior research director at a private biomedical firm in Boston, allowing me to set my own hours and care for my son. A year later, I was walking across the manicured lawns of my new corporate campus, holding a fresh cup of coffee, feeling the crisp autumn air against my face. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was an email alert from a scientific journal, citing my Alzheimer's paper. I smiled, looking up at the bright, clear sky. Arthur thought he could steal my genius and leave me in the dark. He didn't realize that